Hi, welcome back. This is Erin Schultz and Rick Schultz, of course. Welcome back to our second discussion about talking about patents. Last time we talked about what it meant to be non-obvious. So the second point we told you then we were going to come back and talk about it is that it also has to be novel.
Okay. Yeah, those are the two main criteria in order to get a patent. You have to be non-obvious to someone skilled in the trade, and the second criteria is that your idea, invention, or application must be novel.
Okay, so when I hear the word novel, means I think about something that's original, that's piques your interest. It's something new. Is that correct?
Yeah, I wonder if there isn't a little bit of room there for individuals to have their own understanding of what novel is. Although, as a word, it sums itself up quite well. And I think it brings us all to the same type of idea, the same general idea. But there could be a little bit of individual twist, I think, depending on who's actually looking at that patent.
Mm-hmm. So I think about those things, and we've all seen infomercials about things. I mean, sometimes I think a pillow is just a pillow, right? But it's not just a pillow, because somewhere along the line, patents have been awarded to products that are novel, and the criteria, it's defined somehow. Again, I think about mops, and thinking about wringing out a mop in a different kind of way can be novel. Right. So what makes novel when it comes to magnetic innovation?
Well, I think the very first thing that you need to look at once again is who's actually working with you when you're applying for a patent. All right. So let's say it was a talking monkey. Their idea of novel might be very different. In this particular case, we don't have talking monkeys. We've got electrical engineers for the most part. It potentially could fall to a physicist, but I would think that would be relatively rare, unless it was really something that was deep into physics. And this is pretty deep into physics, but its main subject matter is actually under electrical engineering, and the electrical engineers have been the one that have been responsible for actually approving our patents.
We talked about in the last video about things being non-obvious, and the whole idea that we didn't have a dance teacher or a veterinarian, unless they were also qualified in these areas, of course. But the people that are looking at this to determine also that it's novel are individuals who are highly skilled. It kind of plays on the same. The first thing that you need to address when you're applying for a patent.
Right. It's a sad assumption at best to believe that when you're applying with U.S. patents or any patent around the world, that the people that are actually issuing patents are not intelligent or not educated or not qualified. But yet it's a common theme. And one of the reasons for that is because people have such a small understanding of patents. I know before I went into this, I really had no idea what was involved, just how difficult it was going to be to go through the process, how expensive it was going to be to go through the process, and how important that process actually was. All the factors of it and everything that made it. In a patent, when you write it properly, the writing must, in fact, in my opinion, be novel.
Okay. I remember, this is an aside, but I remember years ago, before High Fidelity, we had together, I don't know if you remember this, we went to a meeting that was inventors, and they had qualified people come to talk about inventors, and I remember thinking that this is so odd, that the general assumption was that you could just write it on a piece of paper and mail it to yourself, and that would qualify you for a patent. That would qualify you, I guess, for rights on the idea. But that kind of stopped there for understanding that there was no more information given or an understanding of that process of truly acquiring a patent.
Yeah. Now that was likely, and I believe it is about setting the date for when your invention has actually been invented.
Right.
They've changed U.S. patent law on filing, and it's now first to file, but you can't be first to file on somebody else's invention.
Right. Right. Okay.
Okay, so if somebody's already come up with this and they've done it before you, just because you're first to file doesn't mean you're going to get qualified with an invention. If somebody already came up with it before you, what will happen is you won't get your patent.
So there's a fail-safe. I mean, this is a process that has, you know, that has steps to it, and there are qualifiers, and there's all sorts of things even under that being novel that, you know, first to file.
Oh yeah, it's way more complex than most people would assume. It's way more complex than even most people that have been involved in patents would assume, because it really is a huge area of subject matter. You think of just how many people the patent office, U.S. Patent Office employs, because when they are looking for things like this and they have a criteria of something like novel, whose opinion? And so they actually have a responsibility that it's the opinion of a qualified individual in the exact subject matter that you're dealing with. So in our case, it would be electromagnetism. It's not just electrical engineering, but you'd have to have a specialized skill set in electromagnetism. You may not need to get into the depth of physics that we do in order to be qualified, but you certainly need to have a really good handle on the magnetic rules that are applied to electrical engineering. You hear that lawnmower outside? So we got a great microphone. So
Yeah. Okay. Again, that kind of highlights the idea that the individuals writing the patent also need to be qualified. I mean, you talked a little bit about the language used in a patent, and
they do in part, but they can also lend a lot of the patent as far as expertise in writing it, and even ideas, like not necessarily an idea on your patent to make it better or to define it, you know, to improve it, but to define it better.
okay.
You can get help from your patent attorney. And so your patent attorney is, if you're doing it right, a highly educated person in the subject matter. You want to know, first of all, Erin, if this patent has ever been done before. The idea might have already been covered. So a lot of work goes into finding is there any inventions like this in the marketplace. And one of our obvious potential products that was in the market that could have disqualified us, in my opinion at first, was the MagSafe adapter that pulls off an Apple computer. Because that used a magnet, of course, to keep that on the end, right?
Yeah.
And so the reason why that didn't disqualify us is because they weren't actually putting any signal through that.
Okay.
Okay. There was one patent that was put out there. Our patent actually came first, though, so we were able to get our patent. Our idea came first. Somebody had written a patent in regards to jumping breakers in an electrical box using magnets to go from screw to screw head. So that was one that was out there that was, you know, using signal to go through it that was similar to ours.
Interesting. Well, I think, is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think I just want to help you to understand the importance of that word novel, and we've kind of done that, and that you won't get issued a patent unless it's novel. Going back to our last video when we talked about that it's not obvious to someone skilled in the trade, having this as a secondary thing, I think is kind of cool, because it plays against all that information out there that patents for the most part are stupid. You know, there's so many people that talk about patents in a critical light, as if you know, they will actually patent anything. No, they'll only patent things that are not obvious to someone skilled in the trade and that are novel. That's the only way you can get a patent. You may have an example of a patent that was approved that was ridiculous, and maybe to most people will look ridiculous, and maybe it even is ridiculous. But that is the absolute exception. It's certainly not the rule.
Okay. So in our next video, we'll talk about the actual application process.
All right, we'll go to that next.
Okay.
Thank you for visiting us at High Fidelity Cables. This is Audiophile. I'm Rick.
I'm Erin.
See you next time.
Bye.